Hello, everyone, and happy May, and welcome to PDN Live. Tonight's topic is getting started, new shooters, and new instructors. We have a full house tonight. We have Rob Pincus, the Executive Director of Personal Defense Network, with us, and 5 of our guests who frequently work with new shooters, so their perspective will be great tonight. But before we get to them and introduce them, Rob, hello, how are you?
Oh man, I'm good. I am where am I? The Michigan Tactical Officers Conference, which is known as the Great Lakes Tactical Training Conference. So this is the one of the only couple of law enforcement only stops on the training tour this year. You know, most of the time when it's law enforcement only, I actually made a post today in social media about what we do. It's not like magic ninja secrets. Usually it has to do with either just the camaraderie of a conference like this for the law enforcement community. We just had a great keynote speaker, Brian Hoffner, just did a great kind of warrior's code for these guys presentation at the banquet tonight. And the other problem is the context. Sometimes we're talking about things like, you know, handcuffing or you know, searching buildings, things that generally don't fall under the personal defense side. But obviously we have a lot of law enforcement guys that are fans of Personal Defense Network, IC Training Company, a lot of the combat-focused shooting instructors. We do a lot of work inside of the law enforcement community. So this is one of 2 or 3 things we're doing on the Personal Defense Network tour that really don't have anything to do with secret ninja stuff. In fact, we were talking today, a lot of the officers were talking about how so much of what they learn from PDN applies to them on duty. And of course, most of the time, these guys are at home. They're with their families. They're moving around. They're taking care of off-duty stuff. So all the PDN information applies. And when we're out doing a combat-focused shooting session, it really is the same as what we would do. You know, there's a couple law enforcement guys, former and current, on the show tonight. It's important to remember that it's not just secret law enforcement tactics that are offensive and go after people and assaulting through doors and raiding places. Really, a lot of it just is personal defense. They're doing their everyday job, and they could get caught off guard just as much as we can when we're going to buy pizza or pick a shirt up at the mall. So that's what I'm doing. We've got another almost 2 months left of the training tour, just about 7.5 weeks, 8 weeks left. We got courses coming up throughout the plains, across the Rockies, and up into the Pacific Northwest. So there's a couple of other instructors here that are participating in classes one way or another with the training tour. And Jamie Onion, who we're going to hear from tonight, is also the head of our defensive firearms coaching program. And hopefully he'll get a chance to talk about some of the instructor development that we're doing for the people that are learning to teach exactly the kind of stuff that we're talking about tonight. Getting new shooters started, teaching fundamental defensive shooting skills to people who've either been gun owners and shooters and hunters all their life, or who have never done any of that work before. They just their first time gun owners. They need the stuff that our defensive firearms coaches teach, and that's why we've selected the panel that we have tonight. These people all have varied backgrounds, some extraordinarily experienced people, and some people who are relatively new to the community. But all of them work with new shooters. So here we are.
Awesome. Do you want to give us a quick update on how NRA went for you?
NRA show was great as usual. Really busy. Got to hang out with all of our sponsors. People can check out our Facebook feed and our Twitter feed and Instagram feed for some of the photo ops we took at the sponsors' booths. We gave them all, our appreciation plaques that they displayed in their booths, and hopefully they'll hang proudly back at their corporate headquarters. The NRA show is really important to us because so many people have come to Personal Defense Network through our relationship since 2005 with the NRA as far as distributing our DVDs, and then also obviously the relationship we have with the Personal Defense Network the newsletter. Our actual defensive newsletter is co-branded with the NRA, and we've got 1 million people that get that every month. So our relationship with the NRA is great. I enjoy it because it's the only show I do that's an end user show. The end user show that really lets us mingle with people who've seen the DVDs, people who are premium members or free members, people who get the newsletter from Personal Defense Network. So I spoke 3 times. I did 2 defensive shooting skill development presentations and 1 on home defense and spree killer response. I think surprising some people with how much those 2 areas of tactics and strategy actually overlap. So NRA show was great.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, so I'll let our guests introduce themselves. I'll call on each of you one at a time to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, and this is your opportunity also to plug any business that you have. So first up, Mike, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there, my name is Mike McNamee. I live in eastern Iowa. Been a defensive firearm coach for about a year now, retired out of the military 2004, and got into this after that. I really enjoy it, and thanks for letting me be here.
Glad to have you. Elka, you're up next.
Hey, I'm from Mountain Home, Arkansas, and I have a company and range training at Barron Creek. I'm a pharmacist, which is a bit odd, but it works for me on this, and we are really trying to help folks in our community learn to defend themselves.
Now, are you a pharmacist as a full-time job and then an instructor as well?
Well, I'm a part-time pharmacist and working on full-time instructor.
Fantastic. Perfect to have you on the show tonight then.
Thank
And
you.
Jamie, you're up next.
Okay, Jamie Onion, Cleveland, Ohio area. Got involved with Rob in early 2008, I think, and progressed through to the Combat Focus Instructor program. Been teaching for probably since 2002 in the law enforcement community. Been a police officer for about 16 years, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Glad to have you. Ben, you're up next.
Hi, Ben Turner. I am here in Manassas, Virginia. I work with Evan Carson, who's a combat focused shooting instructor, and I'm one of the main instructors for our defensive firearms coach Inc. program, and I'm with Innovative Defensive Solutions.
Welcome to the show. And last but certainly not least, Jay.
Hi, good evening. Jay Hawkins, Reno Guns and Range in Reno, Nevada. As a police officer for a little over 25 years, served 9 years in the Army, retired and came to work here. Ken Crawford, who's a combat-focused shooting instructor, got me turned on to you guys about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, and just enjoy teaching the defensive focus coach programs.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. It should be a good show tonight. For those of you that are listening live, if you have any questions, just feel free to type them in and we'll do our best to get around to them. And since we have so many people, I'll do my best to keep control. So a couple ground rules. I'll ask guests directly questions and then we'll take turns chiming in. And then we're going to spend the first half of this PDN Live on getting started as a defensive shooter. And then the last half will spend time on the topic of getting started as a defensive shooting instructor. And if you like what you hear, we've got a free newsletter. There should be a link on this page for you all to sign up. So let's get started. Let's just jump right in. Very super simple question. Jamie, for those who are looking to take a handgun class for the first time, is there anything specific they should be looking for in choosing the right one?
Yes, I think the first course that someone looks for needs to be, ground level fundamental course based on the context they're looking for. A lot of the courses that we see offered for first-time shooters are very, very vanilla, and we like to steer our students towards something that's going to not only teach them the fundamentals from the ground up, but teach them for the context that they're looking for, whether it be home defense or concealed carry. They make sure that those components are part of the program that they're looking to get into, especially on the ground floor.
And Elka, how do people even find a class? How do they go about finding the resources and then getting signed up for a class?
Well, we put it on a website, we put it on Facebook, send out emails, and it's interesting trying to get the information out there. You think you're doing a good job sometimes. You can always do more. So I'm still working on getting it out there.
And Mike, what advice do you have for those looking to take a handgun class for the first time, and where can they go to look?
Well, kind of like Jamie said, you really got to look at the context, and they got to vet their instructors. Maybe ask around and not go with the first person they see. You really got to know why and what your goal is right off the bat so you can find an appropriate course. So you're not just out there wasting your money.
And what should they look for, Mike, in a course like this?
I think practicality is a big thing. If you're just going to go out there and learn a bunch of cool drills and let's see how fast we can shoot, that's not going to be something that's appropriate for maybe defense in your home or out in the mall. So you need to look for things that are going to be practical and realistic.
So let's take this question to the next level. So Elka, say someone who is a concealed handgun license holder, shoots twice a week. What's that next step for them? What's the best class for them to take beyond just going to the range and plinking? They're comfortable with a firearm, but what's that next level look like?
Well, if they've got their concealed carry license and they practice, I would like to make sure that they really do understand how and when to use their gun. The fundamentals of concealed carry class is a great one to make sure they've got a good foundation. And then if they'd like to go further, I think one of the CFS classes would be awesome after that.
And Rob, what kind of suggestions would you have for someone who has taken this type of class but ready to take it to the next level?
Once somebody goes through the fundamentals, the trick really is to practice it. I mean, people ask me all the time at the end of a class, whether it's a CFS class, a combat focus shooting, or our fundamental intro for people who are already established shooters and have guns who feel comfortable and confident with their firearm, that are really interested in counter-ambush defensive training. They ask the same thing, and it's usually the answer is get really good at this stuff. If you're going to take the next class, you're going to take it to the next level. For me, most of the time, that means you change the context of what you're doing in terms of personal defense training. You look at a medical class, you look at a mindset or legal aftermath seminar class, you look at maybe you have a rifle or a shotgun, you've got a rifle or a shotgun class after you take that fundamental concealed carry pistol class. Maybe it's unarmed defense, maybe it's health and fitness issues you're going to address. There's a lot of things out there that are important. What we don't want to do, and this is why we separate defensive shooting from shooting in general, we don't want to create shooting hobbyists or pistol training hobbyists that just take every class they can find. It's really important that you work those fundamentals of your defensive pistol shooting in the context of home defense or concealed carry, and then once those things are really good, you move on to things like your two-person armed defense. If you spend a lot of time in the car, maybe your defensive vehicle stuff, or then you take the advanced pistol handling class where you learn to do all the things you did in a fundamental class, but while you're sitting in a chair, lying on your back, while you're leaning around cover. Maybe if you're injured, you have to do a lot of one-handed shooting and manipulations. But I think the most important thing is that once you get that fundamental firearm skill, you start moving kind of laterally and just practice the defensive firearm skills. You get really good at that while you look at other aspects before you just start digging really deep in the shooting. Then, a lot of people that do that, I think most of them just really like shooting, and they use personal defense as their reason to take classes.
So, Jay, what advice do you have for people that have signed up for a class and they're waiting for the class to happen in like the upcoming weeks? What can they do and how can they prep while they're waiting for that class?
One of the things that we've done is we have some intro classes or classes that can start to develop the skill set. One of the things that we don't want is to have them just go off and try and get instruction from somebody who's not going to benefit them, or it's not going to be in the context of what they're trying to accomplish. And then, of course, when they get to the class, they're going to understand, why we teach what we teach and the benefits of the program that we teach.
So I want to ask everyone this question because this came in. I thought it would be really interesting to hear everyone's perspective on this, as there's numerous ways and different methods. But a question that we probably all asked as a new shooter: how do you determine your dominant eye? Mike, you want to kick us off on this one?
Well, classically, you'd use the old thumb and eyeball routine to determine what your dominant eye is. But one of the things we teach is that doesn't really matter, right? You're going to kind of gravitate naturally and intuitively towards the eye that you need to close is just going to close. So the dominant eye thing is really not an important thing overall.
Interesting. Elka, what are your thoughts?
Well, I used to teach people that, and now I don't. I explain to them that with the pistol, they can put the gun right in front of both of their eyes, and they can close the one they need to, and it's not a problem with the pistol. So that kind of takes a burden off a lot of folks, because they usually are pretty stressed over, well, do I, if I'm left-handed and I'm right dominant, is this a problem? So it really eases their mind to understand that that's not anything to get bent out of shape.
Great advice. Jamie?
Well, it's one of those things like, Mike pretty much hit the nail on the head. Coming from the law enforcement community, where we used the thumb test for virtually the whole time I was a law enforcement officer to determine that at the academy level, Now I pretty much tell people that you go through every other activity in your life where you need to be precise with your eyesight, and you figure it out. It's really no different with the gun. Once you bring that gun up into and parallel with your line of sight, you don't overthink it. You're going to close the eye that you need to close and work out the problem when it comes to the precision shot. And kind of to echo what Elka said, once you take that stress off and once they actually experience it and allow themselves to experience it, it really kind of just works itself out from there.
Very cool. Ben, your thoughts?
When we're working with new shooters, we generally just have them start with their both eyes open. We don't have them stress about which eye is dominant, which eye is not dominant. We get them lined up on the kinesthetically aligned on the target, have them start shooting, and show them that they don't need a dominant eye in order to get hits on the target.
And finally, Jay.
Ben actually pretty much nailed it on the head. We start with the fact that the firearm is, when you punch out, is going to be center of view anyways. Both eyes are open. You're focused on the target because in reality, when you're threatened, that's where your focus is going to be. When we get into balance of speed and precision, that's where the closing of the non-dominant eye becomes apparent. And luckily for us, our brain is smart enough to know which one to close, and it will, and you'll be able to line the sights up and get the hit.
Very great advice. I think a great takeaway here is once you take away the figuring out or lack of or not having to figure out the dominant eye, it just takes a lot of stress off the student, which sounds like a very key point and takeaway here. Jay, Will writes in that he's having trouble getting over the fear of carrying around in the chamber. He's uncomfortable at the thought of an accidental discharge. Any advice to Will to get over this fear?
Number one, if you've got a good holster and the trigger guard is covered, that really is kind of a moot point because with the firearm holstered, when you grasp the firearm, if your finger is somewhere other than the trigger, as we teach, it's not going to happen. Where we see people that have had concerns is when they try and carry without a holster or inside a pocket. But again, if you have a good firearm selection, the ones that we prefer people to carry in a defensive context, and you have a good holster, we don't see that as something that's going to occur.
And Mike, do you have any advice for Will on getting over the fear of carrying around in the chamber with the thought of an accidental discharge?
Yeah, he just needs to get more comfortable with the whole process, right? So the more training you get, the more confident you get in your own abilities, and that fear kind of goes away. I mean, you take a good shooting course like we offer, one of the defensive firearm shooting courses, either fundamentals of concealed carry or home defense handgun, and you get familiar with the process, you get familiar with working with the weapon, and you figure out that if you have a good, solid, modern striker-fired pistol, then it's pretty safe with, like Jay said, a good holster and good equipment, good technique.
And Rob, with the numerous students that you come across, have you had any trouble with anyone getting over the fear of carrying around in the chamber? And how do you work through that?
Yeah, in fact, we have people that show up that aren't even carrying guns yet. We have people that show up that say, I have a gun at home. Maybe they have it in a safe. Maybe they do have it staged in some kind of a clandestine storage unit or a quick access vault kind of a thing, but they aren't ready to carry the gun. And then the next step is that maybe they're not ready to carry a gun with a round in the chamber. Now, I'll be honest, I think that most people, once they decide to carry a gun, they decided to carry the gun and realize that the gun is so much less useful if there isn't a round in the chamber that they're over that when they show up. The fact is that the need to use a gun once you're in the public space cannot be predicted nearly as well as it can be inside of the home or in the workplace. If the gun is in a box, you have to get to that box, and the time it takes to get to the box requires a certain amount of warning and a certain amount of knowledge that there's an imminent event coming. So you can think more about having the round not chamber. You can think more about having the magazine out of the gun inside of that vault. Grab the gun, grab the magazine, insert and rack. But if you're carrying a gun in the public space, someone may be on top of you, and that's how you know you're in a fight. You just got tackled, hurt, pushed down. Maybe you're trying to stop a knife attack, and you're holding on to that knife now with one hand or the other. if you set yourself up so that you've gone to all this trouble, you've gotten the permit, you've gotten the holster, you've gotten the gun, you've gotten the shooting practice, you've developed the skills, you're changing your lifestyle. Maybe the kind of holster you bought didn't work, you had to buy another one. Maybe you changed the belt you wear, you changed the clothing you wear. You don't go into certain restaurants because they're posted, and yet now here you are in this extreme situation where you need a gun, and the gun isn't ready to be used, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're going through all those steps. Not to make it sound daunting, but there's work to be done here. If you want to carry a gun in public, you have a responsibility to make sure that you're doing it right. Now here you are having met all that responsibility, and yet you don't have the gun ready to use. That's the bottom line. So we make that really clear, I think, in all of our messaging through PDN, through IC, through CFS, and certainly the defensive firearms coaches. It's one of the best things they can do is let somebody know that carrying the gun is a responsibility that allows you to be prepared. So be prepared.
So Mike, have you had to have that chat with a student before of the fact that carrying a gun is a huge responsibility, and how do you, as an instructor, how do you have that conversation with your student?
Well, I have a really frank conversation with people. Carrying a gun to public space or really anywhere, a firearm is, it's a huge responsibility, and you have to be mentally prepared for that. If you're not mentally prepared, maybe you're not ready yet. So we talk about those things. We talk about any issues that, they may have, questions about should I carry it around the chamber, that sort of thing. They always come up, but they've really got to be mentally prepared that if they are going to take a gun out in the public space, that they need to be prepared to employ it for what it's used for if necessary, and just take on that responsibility.
Great advice. So Ben, our audience is really into resources of information after the show. What have you found as the best resource to find the most current gun and self-defense shooting laws and information in general?
Personal Defense Network is one we always recommend at the end of our classes. Andrew Branca's book. The name is escaping me at the moment. Anyone else on that one?
Jamie, what do you find is the best resource for finding more information on self-defense, gun laws, shooting laws, and just the follow-up after a student has taken a class?
Well, since like Rob said, I am the program director for the defensive firearms coach, so I go all over the U.S. and instruct instructors how to do the intro to concealed carry. And one of the things that we don't spend a lot of time talking about in that course is the laws. But what I do tell the new instructors is that probably one of the best resources is to send the students to their state attorney general's website and look at the statutes that are presented on that website, because those are probably going to be the most current in regard to the legal statute. Then what they have to do is they have to find either an attorney or an instructor that can interpret them into English sometimes for them to be able to understand them a little bit better. Because a lot of those laws are presented in the gray. A lot of people see it as on purpose, but it's because they are vague and contextual. So if they have specific questions for their context, it's really good to find a local attorney that is familiar with those self-defense laws in their particular state. Once they find them on the Attorney General's website. Now there are some decent websites out there like handgunlaws.us and things like that, but we have found some significant issues with updates, not misinformation, but pieces that have changed for the better or that have changed for the worse that haven't been updated that quickly. So just to reiterate, usually the state attorney general, and then they're going to have to find someone to assist them in interpreting if they have any questions once they review those statutes.
Solid answer. Thank you, Jamie. That's been asked a lot on other PDN Lives, and we haven't been able to get around to it, so thank you. Rob, we got in a live question from Brian, and he asks, in the context of the CFS system curriculum, which course would be the most basic skill level and the one you would recommend to a shooter with no formal defensive pistol training to begin with?
No formal defensive pistol training, I would say, would still be very appropriate for the combat focused shooting program. No shooting experience whatsoever, no experience with a gun. Then we'd probably send them to the home defense fundamentals class, fundamentals of home defense, under one of our defensive firearms coaches class. Now, this is where it gets kind of confusing, but you have to think it through. If someone is an experienced shooter, but they're not interested in taking the gun out in the public space, and they maybe can't afford the time or the money investment, or they can't get away, to where the combat focus shooting program is being offered, then that fundamentals of home defense class may also be perfect for them. What you have to remember is that, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are shooters and gun owners and have been for a long time who really aren't incredibly well versed in the concepts of defensive shooting. Maybe they don't even realize there's something different between defensive shooting and the shooting that gets done on the range. The shooting on the range is, I talk about the range is kind of like a racetrack. If you've ever rented a race car or gone to a track day or watched racing, if you're aware that racing exists, right? You know how it works. There's no real, you can pass on the left, pass on the right. You can you have slick tires on the car. You don't have to worry about some of the rules of the road per se. You're out there. You don't have to worry about taking that corner when you're making that left-hand turn, go all the way over to the left, right to the apron of that corner. That's how you should take a corner when you're on a racetrack. Well, if you took a really good race car and really good racing techniques that you practiced and got really good at, and you tried to drive away on a real road, you would die. You would have, with your slick tires, and it started raining, and you'd slide off the road. And if you tried to apex that turn going to the left, and if the truck was coming the other way, you'd hit the truck and hurt other people. Obviously, if you were passing on the left, passing on the right, driving erratically, not paying attention to any kind of a speed limit or rules of the road, you'd get arrested. You'd lose your license at the very least. So if people take the best gear and the best techniques and the best way to pass a qual course or do a timer drill or win a competition, they spend their time on the range trying to get really good at that. They may believe that they're a great shooter and that they have great gear, but if they haven't trained in a way that is contextually appropriate for the defensive world, when you're surprised, when you're caught off guard, and there's variables you have to process all the time. And that's what happens when you're driving a real car. When you're driving a real regular car on the real roads, you have to be processing information all the time and sort of almost driving in the background. You have to monitor the speed and control the wheel and listen to the engine. If you're driving a manual car, you have to do all that in the background of paying attention to everything around you. Well, that's how a gunfight is. In a defensive shooting situation, you have all these variables you have to process, and those variables are the kinds of things that are addressed in that fundamentals of home defense in the context of the house. We also talk about the tactics. We talk about gear selection. What kind of gear is best for home defense? We talk about staging your firearm. These are all things that longtime firearms owners may not have thought of, the difference between staging and storage. If you are interested in concealed carry permit, that's where that fundamentals of concealed carry comes from. Again, a great fundamental course for anybody who isn't well versed in the law, who isn't well versed in the holster selection, who isn't well versed in the techniques, who isn't well versed in the defensive shooting techniques, defensive shooting gear, as opposed to general shooting. If someone is really good at general shooting and they understand the guns, they understand the gear, or at least believe they do, then and they have the extra time or the extra money to get to a CFS class, then that may be a great starting point for them as well. It would be unfortunate to characterize it as if I wouldn't tell a lot of our CFS graduates to go back and take the home defense course or the concealed carry course, especially because of the tactics that are covered there, as opposed to CFS, which is really a skill development course. But if somebody's truly new, if they've never done this before, definitely one of the defensive firearms coaching courses is going to be a better introduction, 4 to 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours, as opposed to the full long day at the CFS course or even 2 days in our normal class.
So we're getting towards the top of the half an hour mark, but I have one more question regarding new shooters before we move on to becoming an instructor. So Elka, what advice do you have for ammo selection for a new shooter? Is there a difference in what they should bring to a class versus what they intend to use when they're carrying?
Well, when they are going to come to a class, they need to use a practice ammo that's going to be less expensive for them, the full metal jacket, and I personally prefer the brass cased ammo over the steel or aluminum cased. It runs better, and so the least expensive you get, but don't go too cheap. And then for their carry, they're going to, of course, need a defensive round, which we recommend a bonded hollow point good for the grain weight ammo.
Thank you. And Mike, what advice do you have for ammo selection for new shooters?
Well, kind of echo what Elka said. I mean, they need to bring in the appropriate, obviously caliber for their firearm. That's surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, sometimes that is an issue. So make sure they bring the right caliber, something that's good quality ammunition from a reputable manufacturer. And then, of course, when they want to, their carry ammo needs to be a bonded hollow point, heavy for caliber. It's probably more expensive than what they want to practice with.
And Jay, do you think if money wasn't an option, you would recommend that students should bring what they intend to carry with, or do they, like everyone has echoed before, find that good balance between not breaking the bank with bringing 500 rounds, 1,000 rounds to class versus what they're going to intend to carry in that firearm?
If we're going to have a class that has a high round count, we do want a good manufactured or remanufactured ammo for the particular caliber. But we also encourage that they do test the protection ammo or the ammo they plan to carry in it, so that they see, one, that it's going to work and they have the confidence it's going to work in their firearm. There have been incidents in the past where some protection ammo simply just didn't work in the firearm. So that gives them an opportunity. Usually that'll be something at the end of the training where they can run that through and see that it does work. Yeah, if I had an endless amount of money, I'd want to run what I'm going to use for protection, but we have to live in the real world, and there's good, inexpensive ammo that's available that they can train with. But again, test the stuff you're going to carry, make sure it works.
Awesome, thank you. And Ben, before we move on to our second topic of the evening, do you have any last parting thoughts or words of advice for new shooters who are about ready to take their first class?
Yeah, just come with an open mind, be prepared, and most importantly, have fun. You're spending the day on the range. While yes, you're learning something that's possibly going to save your life, it's still the range time. It's still have fun.
Great parting words. So now we're going to shift the second half of this PDN Live from the topic of getting started new shooters to the topic of getting started as a new instructor. And briefly, I just kind of want to ask everyone, how did they get started as an instructor? Was it something where you've always had that natural teaching drive in you, or was it a career choice? What drove you into becoming a firearms or personal defense instructor? So Mike, would you like to kick us off with that?
Sure. So when I was in the military, one of the main kind of core missions of my job was to teach foreign military, and I actually spent 3 years as an instructor in the Special Warfare Center. So I always enjoyed the teaching aspect of my job. And then when I retired and I started taking some training or seeking out some training for myself, and I discovered the the CFS family of courses, I was like, this is something I really believe in. This is something I want to learn how to teach. So I started going down that road and took the defensive firearm coaches course, or instructor development course, and eventually I took the CFS ID course, and I just really enjoyed teaching. So that's kind of how I got started.
Very cool. And Nelka, how did you get started in this?
I was, practicing pharmacy, and the best part about pharmacy is teaching people how to help take care of themselves, to be their own advocate. And I was a daily concealed carry person, and it took me a long while to get comfortable with that. And it would be really nice, I thought, to have people have that opportunity to learn and maybe shorten the get comfortable part. And I had folks asking me to teach them, and I didn't have any qualifications to teach. And being able to shoot well and all that is not the same as being able to teach someone to do it. So I thought, I'm going to learn to teach, and started seeking instruction, started with the NRA. But when I found ICU training and CFS, and the really teach people to defend themselves with a handgun as opposed to shoot, I was all in.
Very cool. Very cool. And Jamie?
Well, what happened is, early on in my law enforcement career, I had the opportunity to go to as much training as I wanted to, which set me a little bit apart when we had kind of range days at the PD. So that led me in, because I was one of our quote-unquote better shooters, that led me into the opportunity of getting into instruction in the law enforcement, whether I wanted to or not. I really didn't have a desire at first to be an instructor, and then I once I found Rob's information and Combat Focus Shooting Instructor Development Program, it really gave me the tools I needed to convey the information to not only my officers, but the students, if you will, outside of law enforcement. And I was really able to take that information now, and where I thought I had put in all this work and all this years building myself up to be a shooter and a better instructor, with the correct tools and the right instructional information, you can take a ground level instructor and get them just as proficient as your long-term instructor much, much quicker. And once I was able to get rid of the frustrations of not being able to convey the information properly, it really became not only an interest but a passion to pass on that information to make people safer, to be able to convey as much information in the shortest amount of time I could. And that's kind of what got me into it. It's kept me fueled and strive to continue.
And Ben.
Initially, I got started training people when I was in the Marine Corps, doing rifle marksmanship and pistol marksmanship. From there, when I got out, a lot of my civilian friends asked me to take them to the range, teach them how to shoot. So I started doing that, and then it led into one of my buddies coming back and giving me a hard time because everything that I had taught him at the range wasn't transferable for him to get a carry conceal. So then I started seeking out being credentialized. So I started with the NRA. And then I had a personal incident where I had a home invasion on me, and it got me into a lot more defensive-minded shooting and personal defense. And then that's when I came across the DFC course, and actually my co-instructor, Evan, had sponsored Jamie to come out here and teach the DFC course. So I jumped in with that both feet and have loved every minute of it since.
Wow. Very interesting story. And Jay, I didn't forget about you. How did you get involved?
Early on when I was in the military, I was pretty passionate about training and was hanging around afterwards asking questions. And the first sergeant grabbed me and said, well, if you're that interested in it, you need to become an instructor, which surprised me because there was so much more information on the instructor side that you weren't getting on the end user side. And that just drove me to become more passionate about teaching because I was learning so much more. And then when I got out of the military, got into law enforcement, that passion just continued, but I was seeing that what we were doing on the law enforcement side was not how I was actually responding to incidents that I became involved in as a police officer. And that's where getting into the combat focused shooting system, it all just made sense. The things that I was seeing that I was doing naturally were things that they were teaching, and that just increased the passion even more. I love teaching people. I love seeing them grow and learn and experience the things that they can do to make themselves safer, and that just inspires me to want to do more and more.
We have quite the diverse instructors here and how they got involved. So definitely a lot of different perspectives here for this second half. Jay, how about we roll into the second half? So as an instructor, what type of insurance do you carry, or is it covered under the range you teach at? This is one of the first questions that new instructors always ask is insurance.
With our facility here, we're covered under the range, which is nice. Prior to that, there are different places like the NRA that you can get insurance. It is, as an instructor, a critical component because you can be sued for anything, and obviously no one wants that. You can put safeguards in, as much as you want, but things can happen. So I can see that being a great question, but we're covered here under the facility, and we have great owners here, or a great owner, I should say.
And Rob, being the nomad trainer that you are, what kind of instructor insurance do you carry?
I carry the insurance under Lockton, which is associated with the NRA also. The reality is that NRA instructor benefit that you get, that you can sign up for Lockton insurance, a lot of people see that as tied to the NRA, but Lockton is the name of the insurance company. You can get that you can get that underwriting regardless of whether you're specifically NRA certified or not. And if you have it as an NRA certified instructor, you can maintain that afterwards. And it's a great program. It gives you that $1 million of general liability that most people are looking for. You know, in the past, especially during the Valhalla era, I carried a lot more insurance. I carried ideas like there were a lot insurance for other things like another professional in another area, like an architect or someone who was consulting, maybe a medical practitioner would have. And these types of errors and omissions policies, sometimes people ask me about them. And my understanding is that when there isn't an industry standard, when there isn't an overriding industry common practices sort of collection, that you can't really define what an error or an omission would be. So inside of our program in the private sector, we're teaching things that we define the common practices, and by definition, many of our common practices do change as we meet different students. From time to time, we'll do things differently. You know, I tell students every day at 9 o'clock, 9:30, we're talking through here's what's going to happen during the day, or we're getting into the meat of here's how the schedule is going to run. And I tell them, I don't know what we're going to do at 2 o'clock. So the idea that there would be an errors and omissions, even as the head guy in the CFS program, I can't tell you that an instructor was wrong for not doing a certain drill at 11 o'clock in the morning, or for choosing to do something else at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on day 2 than I might have done in my last class, because most of my classes are different. You know, the idea that it's always going to be the same, it's just not real. We're dealing with so many variables of ranges that we teach on, the students that we have, the gear that they have, the experiences that they have, their physical capabilities. All of these issues are important in determining exactly what it is that we're going to teach. So what we teach in terms of the curriculum, if someone's reading off a clipboard and doing exactly the same thing every time, that class probably isn't worth attending, because they're not catering it to you. It's probably really, really simple. It's lowest common denominator, probably outdated. It's an outdated teaching method. To think that you're going to be teaching the same thing every day to every class, it has to be a lowest common denominator class. It's not being customized. So find a different instructor.
Good advice. Jamie, you've had several hundred hours of training. Once a person becomes an instructor, what tools are out there to continue their education?
Well, I think, like Rob stated earlier, I think that we have to start, once we have those baseline instructor credentials, we have to make sure that we know what else is out there, not only what is in line with what we're teaching, but what's different and incongruent with what we're teaching, because it's also going to help us validate what we do teach and be able to explain to our students why we teach it the way we do, and why we believe those techniques are better or more applicable than some of the other things that are out there. So I guess it's about being a perpetual student yourself as well as an instructor, and not only just from the instructor development side, but also best practices in other areas. You have to understand that you're going to be responsible for safety as an instructor, so I think it's important to get out there and get some medical training, so you have some of that baseline information, as well as understand what your liabilities are, so you can look for the proper insurance and proper safety protocols and things like that when you do visit a range. So I think it goes far beyond just the instructional information. I think you have to add more components to your instructor bag once you have that the path that you're walking and the concepts and principles that you feel you're comfortable.
Very good. And Elka, what have you done to further your education as an instructor?
Well, the DFC instructor class, the CFS classes, I've taken some medical training, and I try to read as much as I can. I'm planning on taking some more courses this summer as well that are offered by ICE training. So just going to keep going with it.
And Mike, any advice to new instructors on continuing their education?
Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase that I use quite a bit. It's called relentless forward progress. It's a phrase I use, and you always got to look to kind of grow your skill set. You know, like Jamie said, you should be a perpetual student. If you're not teaching, maybe you should be taking a class, reading some literature, looking back at your notes, constantly just trying to improve yourself and not getting stagnant and kind of accepting the status quo.
And Mike, or no, not Mike, sorry, Elka, you teach at the range at Barron Creek in Arkansas. What's the process of getting hired to teach at a range? Like, say you make that decision that you want to become an instructor. How do you go about getting hired as one?
On the range. It's my range. We built it, and it actually, and in all jest, that is one thing that I think is very difficult. If you have a passion to teach, and you want to teach, and you don't have a place to teach, that makes it hard. And I have a couple other CFS instructors who work with me, and it's been a passion and a goal of ours to have this and have it available. And the nice thing about my range is the only thing that is done on my range are the classes that we teach. So we don't have to share it with anyone. This makes it wonderful. So yeah, that's a tough question, but for me, yeah, build the range.
So you being the range owner, what do you look for in a potential instructor?
I've got two great ones. They are patient, they are knowledgeable, they are good communicators. They make people feel comfortable and encourage them to learn. And between the two of them and me, we really do a good job helping people to understand what they're trying to do. And I think that's a hard thing on the range when people are learning, because sometimes you can say something to someone and they don't understand. But if different people say it in different ways, and it hits for somebody. So that's a real plus for us, and we all work well together, and they're great guys, so I'm thankful to have them.
Very cool, and thank you for giving us your perspective from being the range owner and what you look for in an instructor. Jay, what was your process of getting hired to teach pistol and defensive firearm skills?
I got lucky here because I started with this company the day after I retired, and then continued with the combat focus shooting program, and then the defensive focus or firearms coach with Jamie. And what we've done here, because we do get a lot of people that are interested in instruction, is we encourage them to become a range safety officer first, to get into the classes, see what it is that the program teaches, and then as they learn that, we evolve them or bring them into the defensive firearms coach instructor development class. We currently have 4 brand new instructors that finished that last month. They're getting the requirements that they need for the state to do the CCW with the NRA, and then they're going to start teaching the fundamentals of home defense, fundamentals of concealed carry classes. And it's just it's good to see that we're able to expand. We're now up to 9 instructors here at Reno Guns and Range, and as the range of continues to grow, we hope to be able to bring more and more instructors on board.
Again, another great perspective. So we've talked about how you can start becoming an instructor, how you get hired on the range. Rob, what do you do when you're an instructor? How do you promote yourself and promote your business to get more students into your classes?
I think the thing that when I'm mentoring any instructor from any program, or even obviously in other areas, I was speaking with one of our medical instructors associated with Personal Defense Network, and I told him, that canceling a class because you're going to break even or you're not going to make much money is, that's what we were discussing was kind of what the limits are. And what I told him was, it reminded me of my biggest piece of advice I have is that our best advertisement is going to be a satisfied, happy student that really isn't happy because we made them feel good or gave them false confidence or had a cheap course, but a satisfied customer, really, someone who came to the class, who worked hard, who saw us work hard, who saw us be passionate about our craft and be knowledgeable and be good educators, not just storytellers or demonstrators, but really educate them so that they gain from the class and they understand what they need to do, and that once they understand that, once they have that skill set down, they're going to want to tell people about it. They're going to want to tell people, what their experience was, how it worked out for them, how we handled them and their struggles, and maybe push them to find their struggles and find their challenges. Once we've established that with another person, that person becomes the best advertising we can have, that third-party endorsement from a peer when they go out and tell their friends about it, or if you just put their testimonial up on the website, or you put their video or their quote on your social media. That's really important. I think to a certain extent, using social media and showing people, hey, look, I'm out teaching. Here's other people who trust me with this information. They're paying for it. They're showing up. They're doing the work, and I'm meeting their needs out on the range. So holding classes, I mean, that holding classes, getting experience as an instructor kind of lends itself to the advertising and marketing process, because the more classes you offer, the more satisfied students you have, the more word of mouth that you have that gets spread. You know, I think manipulating social media, you know, capitalizing on all the opportunities there, making sure that you're sharing, you're connecting, you're talking to other instructors who feel similarly to you in terms of philosophy, making sure that they're sharing your classes and you're promoting their stuff. You know, just around the country and regionally, working with your local gun shops, capitalizing on those opportunities, talking to local media. All of those things are great, but ultimately the idea that you can really, you know, if you break even on a class and you do well, you invested your time in the advertising component. And if you gave up, if you lost $500, if a range is charging you $500, which is on the high end, way on the high end really for a per day use for a range, if you did have to pay $500 and you shot $40 worth of targets, and you lost some staples, and you gave the students some water, and you had a day where you were away from your family, but you leave that class area with you know, you charged 5 students $100 that day, and those 5 students just made it so that you could, you know, pay the range fees or towards the range fees, and you leave that $300, $400, $500 that you had to invest max bought you incredible advertising. You know, if you could go find if you could give $100 to somebody instead of $5,000 to a magazine article, but give $100 to somebody to go out and be an advocate for you, that's huge. It's absolutely huge. So holding classes, teaching people, and doing well, that's really important.
Great advice. So Ben, how do you balance a normal job with being a podcaster, instructor, expert on the side? A lot of new instructors have to find that work balance. How do you find that balance?
At times it's difficult, especially I'm an IT consultant by day, and I'm constantly getting calls from my clients saying, hey, I need to fix this, hey, I need to fix that. But this is a passion. So with it being a passion of mine to not only teach, but also to help people live a safer life, it's something I make time for. So on my commute into work, I'm sitting there, I'm listening to other podcasts, or I'm sitting there reading magazine articles or information on the internet. The train ride home, I'll be typing up notes for our next podcast, or reviewing class notes from our last class that we gave. So once it becomes a passion, it's real easy to make and find that time to dedicate to it.
Solid advice. And Elka, we learned that you are a range owner, a part-time pharmacist. How do you balance it all?
Well, I do the pharmacy not very often, and I'm still working on getting it all squared away, but it's getting better. And like Rob said, we have a small area, and our draw is pretty tiny, but by staying out there and good word of mouth, if we have a class and it has 1 or 2 people in it, we have the class, and people do really appreciate that. And so we're just keep hanging in there, and I think eventually it'll get bigger. And we're providing this in an area of the country that's kind of an open spot, so we're trying to get it out there to places like Springfield, St. Louis, Fayetteville, Arkansas. So hopefully, even though we're in a small place, we'll get a little more business.
And Mike, what advice do you have for those instructors that are starting out that still have the full-time job but instructing on the side? What advice do you have for them to stay motivated and stay focused?
Well, until very recently, I was working your traditional Monday through Friday job. I've got a little bit more flexibility now, but I mean, you just really got to be committed. So you got to make sure it's okay. The family's okay with you, using your time, because your time is valuable to them as well as it is to you. And they got to be okay with you being gone some Saturdays and Sundays, or maybe some evenings if you're teaching concealed carry classes or something like that. So you've really got to be organized, and internally motivated to make a go of this, I guess.
Great advice. Well, we're getting to the top of the hour, and we've had really good, solid conversations about becoming a student as well as becoming an instructor. So before we sign off tonight, I want everyone to talk about where potential students can find them, where they're teaching, what activities they have coming up, and most importantly, where they can find you online on social media. So Jay, where can people find you after the show?
www.renoguns.com. Some of the great training we have coming up. Rob will be out here with the two-person armed defense. We're running the fundamentals of home defense and concealed carry classes once a month. We do end ours with reality-based training, so they do get an opportunity to evaluate their training against role players with real firearms and the ATK marking cartridges. Just get a hold of us anytime at Reno Guns and Range. And thanks for the invite to this.
Thank you for being here. And Ben, tell us a little bit about the podcast and where people can find you after the show as well.
For training, go to www.innovative-defensive-solutions. It's right down on my bottom third. Just put all the words together. .com. We run at least 1 or 2 classes every month. It's all on our calendar. And in terms of the podcast, it is personaldefensetalk.com, and it's available for download on iTunes and Google Play, or whatever the Google one is. I can't remember.
It's Google Play.
Right.
And Jamie, what are you up to, and where can people find you after the show?
Okay, well, coming up, I'll be actually out Mike's Way with Rob. We'll be teaching out at Brownells. That's in early June. And then also you can find me on the ICU training website on the PDN tour, teaching the defensive firearms coach program throughout the U.S. I do not have my own company, but I teach quite a bit under Rob's banner. And you'll see that we have 2 of the defensive firearms coach programs coming up pretty quickly, one in California, one in Illinois, and then later in the year we have New York and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania will be on there shortly. And if any of the viewers are interested in hosting a class or talking more about that, they can contact me either through the combatfocusshooting.com website. All my information is up there, or through Facebook. Jamie Onion's pretty easy to remember. They can friend me on there, and I'd be happy to discuss hosting one of our entry-level instructor courses out there.
Fantastic. And Elka, where can people find you after the show?
Training at BaronCreek.com on Facebook, and Combat Focus Shooting website. We have a schedule on the trainingatbaroncreek.com website, and we run combat focus shooting classes about every month, and the fundamentals of home defense handguns and fundamentals of concealed carry either every month or every other month, and also the Arkansas concealed carry classes.
Fantastic. And Mike, where can we find you?
So they can check out my website, www.18zulu.com. I've got some class listings there. In the near future, I'll be teaching a fundamentals of concealed carry class on the 5th of June with Cedar Valley Outfitters. I teach quite a bit with them. Cedar Valley Outfitters is also hosting some of the other guys here. Rob and Jamie are going to come out at Searsboro, and I'll be there as well, teaching on the 7th and taking some classes on the 9th. So that's what I'm doing in the future, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And Rob, last but certainly not least, where can we find you, and what will you be doing after the show?
After the show, I'm going to continue to Ekadog. People will see on the Facebook I don't know, she's like the mascot of the PDN tour this year. Ekadog's been a little rambunctious here in the hotel room. So I'm going to go walk the dog. I'm still here at the training conference. I'm going to take her outside, and we're going to hang out with some of the other officers and the guys from all over the Great Lakes region that are hanging out here. We've got guys on both sides of the Great Lakes. We have some Canadian officers, too. So I'm teaching here again tomorrow. Then I'm teaching near Ann Arbor, Michigan, a combat-focused shooting course. Then I'll be in Wisconsin on Memorial Day weekend, heading over to Minnesota, PDN headquarters. I'll be doing some live stuff, some video from PDN headquarters, working with Gander Mountain Academy in Madison, in La Crosse, and in Lakeville, Minnesota. Then, as you've heard from some other people, we're going to be down in Iowa. We're going to be doing a lot down there with Cedar Valley Outfitters and the Brownell Big Springs range. We've got like I don't know, I think it's like 10 or 11 classes over the course of 5 or 6 days with a whole bunch of instructors. That's going to be great. People can learn about all these classes at personaldefensenetwork.com under the training tab. Take a look at the blog, too. We've had some really interesting articles at the blog at personaldefensenetwork.com. Mike's written a great one. Craig Weir wrote a great one recently about reaching out to people who aren't quite sure about guns, exactly the kind of people that might need to hear this broadcast, the kind of people in your social media circles that, or your family circles, your work circles that you might want to hear from, have them hear from a bunch of professional instructors, you know, how to get started, what should they look for, what kind of classes do we offer as a team around the country. And you know, there's a lot of things going on in our community politically now. It's a very, obviously, it's a presidential election year. There's a lot being talked about, and a lot of what we put out in the blog addresses some of the social issues of getting people interested in all aspects of personal defense, obviously including firearms. That's a politically hot topic. The responsibility of firearms around kids, things like that. We cover all that stuff in the blog much more than we do in our feature videos and feature articles. So people should take a look at that, the training tab and the blog tab over at personaldefensenetwork.com. And, of course, icetraining.us. We've got the calendar over there that a lot of these people are involved with. They can find out their schedules as well, and their links as combat focus shooting instructors at combatfocusshooting.com. You know, I want to say that this is probably the least involved I've been in one of the PDN live events, and it's great. We had a great panel of very professional people who come from a very diverse set of backgrounds, who spend a lot of time helping people, especially new shooters, and several of them are new, and if they're not new instructors, as many people heard, they're new to private sector instruction. So after teaching a lot in the public sector, it's a big shift. So I think we're going to do this again. I think we may do another new shooter focused. I mean, a lot of questions, and we had a lot of questions that went unanswered, so a new shooter focused video chat live, and also a new defensive shooting instructor focused one live. I think those will come up sometime in the next year. I've also been talking to some other great guests, and people should remember, if they enjoy PDN Live, that we now have a live show hosted by Grant Cunningham that happens twice a month, and that's called Training Talk, and tomorrow will be the last episode in May. Training Talk is another live 1-hour broadcast that talks a lot about the topics that are going on in personal defense land, as well as the stuff that we're putting out at Personal Defense Network. So not just the self-defense community in general, but Grant does a great spin on some of the most recent articles and videos. So take a look at personaldefensenetwork.com, take a look at Training Talk, take a look at the training schedule, take a look at the blog.
And don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter as well. Thank you, everyone, tonight. Mike, Elka, Jamie, Ben, Jay, Rob, thank you so much. Great conversation. And everyone have a wonderful evening.